Well, hey everybody, and welcome back. Right, today is not going to be one of my normal videos. I generally just go in, hell for leather, smack them down and call them retarded and stuff, but not this time. This time we're going to talk about Tim Pool, and not in any bad way. I actually quite like Tim, but something has always just not sat quite right with me with him, and in this recent video I've watched of his, he displays some of the things that made me, you know what I mean. It's a strange feeling, right? So what we're going to do is we're not going to react to, well, we are going to react along to what he's saying, but I'm going to not respond to him, but address the way he's saying things and what he's saying, not actually talking about what he's saying. Well, we might do that, it just depends how it goes, but if you're wanting a short video or this isn't kind of the thing you're looking for, I understand, but this may be a long one. So anyway, let's just jump into it then.
I'd be willing to make a bet right now that in about 20 or 30 years, stories like this won't matter, and we're going to look back on this as bigoted. This story is about a school punishing a male teacher for refusing to watch a naked female in the boys' locker room. And that is a completely hyperbolic title, okay? They are framing it.
Right, see, here's the thing. I've read the article, right? I've also watched this video. And it's not hyperbolic, but that's beside the point. Look at what Tim is doing here. He's trying to paint the title and the picture in a way that presents it as a normal thing that's been blown out of proportion. Or he's trying to make it out like it's a normal thing that's been blown out of proportion. And it's not. And you'll see as this video continues the way Tim reacts to what's happening and the way that 90% of the world react differently to the way he is and the way he's looking at it. But let's continue on, and you'll start to understand what I mean when we start talking about it more.
What this really is that a transgender female student, that means born female, identified as a male, wanted to use the boys' locker room, and the teacher wasn't okay with it, and many of the students weren't okay with it, and someone complained. Framing it as though he's refusing to watch a naked girl in the boys' locker room is a bit extreme, in that you don't necessarily expect teachers to watch the boys either, right? They supervise for sure, but you don't gotta stare or anything like that. And so
Right, and so begins Tim stumbling over himself, simply to try and figure out a way, as far as I can tell, to frame this so it's not as bad as it seems, because he's obviously read this article. And this is the thing that annoys me. He frames his titles with SJW in it, right? But Tim, well, as you'll see as we go along, his inner SJW seems to make an appearance. And I always thought him, well, back in the earlier days of his stuff, he was a centrist. I mean, yes, he had a few liberal beliefs, but he had a few conservative ones too, which made him right middle of the road, and I quite like watching that. But anyway, this is getting off point. Let's see how he continues to try and spin this to frame it out to not be as ridiculous as it is.
what's interesting about this story is that when I read it, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree, I think there is an analog to civil rights, especially with my, the stories I learned from my family about race mixing and all that stuff. There is an affront to people's sensibilities.
Okay, maybe I will comment on something he says. An affront to whose sensibilities? I don't have a problem with them mixed races. Families, man, hell. My grandparents are Romanian, my dad's side, my mum's Scottish, my mum's family Scottish. Who gives a shit? I mean, who cares, Tim? That's the thing. You're trying to frame it like people are against being mixed race. I mean, that's the way you're saying it. It's not an affront to anybody's sensibilities, but still. You see what I'm talking about? He's trying to spin things, and maybe it's just me, maybe I'm losing my mind about this, but he's trying to frame it in a way that makes things seem inevitable, but let's just continue.
To see a white person and an Asian person together, and that all changed. And I think we're going to be getting away from how we differentiate between male and female in terms of social systems. And this is a good example of that. Naturally, the conservative side is going to argue that this shouldn't be, but I think it's fair to say, whether or not you agree that it's right, and I'm not making a moral argument here. I'm not saying it was right or was wrong. I'm simply stating I'd be willing to bet in 30 years people will look back on these stories and say, wow, how bigoted was everybody? I think we're moving in a direction where we're going to have, I mean, what's the point of even having a men's room and a women's room if you can just choose to be in either one and it's all societal, right?
Right. Now here's where I start to have problems. Right, he's going on, these things are societal. Right, and he's going into the future and these things are going to be the norm. Have you not realised, Tim, that pretty much the entire population of the world doesn't quite see it that way, and it's only a small minority of people that do, and those small minorities have got those small voices, as they should be, have a really big fucking microphone, because it's easy to get drowned out in a sea when you're one voice. 10 voices is a bit louder, but 100 voices and a big microphone. You get what I mean here. This small vocal minority of people who think gender is fluid, right, when the world we live in is sexually dimorphic. And what I mean by that is everything, and I mean absolutely every biological organism on this planet, apart from single-celled ones and certain certain species who multiply by division, right, mitosis, where they separate. Everything apart from that is male and female. That is plants, insects, mammals, sea creatures, fish, everything in this entire planet, in this little orb that we call Earth, is male and female. Now, there are a couple of creatures on this planet that can change their sex from between male and female at will. Well, on circumstance, should I say. And I would say 4, right? Certain species of frogs, snails, and slugs, obviously. Well, I'm pretty sure slugs too. Clownfish, I think, can do it, or certain sea creatures, crustaceans can. Right. And I don't know, I think that's just about it. Well, anyway, crustaceans and sea creatures, these things can do that, right? However, mammals don't and can't, right? Now, I have no problem with transgender men and transgender women. None whatsoever. But again, male and female, sexually dimorphic, right? As we're the pan, fluid, sexual, whatever nonsense you want to put name to it, is just a fashion, a fad, something that'll pass as quickly as it comes. But this is where we see Tim's inner, what I would class, SJW come out in the works. And as I've probably said previously in this video, he frames his titles to say the words SJW so you click onto it. He's pretending to be a centrist or someone who has an equal view on things, but really when you listen to the way he says things, and the way he the way he words things, and the way he projects how this is going to be normalised over the next 30 years, and they're going to look back at it and say, wow, this is bigoted. No, he is right. We are going to look back at it, and we're going to look back at it as a time we were fucking stupid and let this thing go as far as it did. That's what they're going to look back at. But anyway, let's get back to Tim.
And if you're a male who identifies as a woman, or a female who identifies as a man, then what does it matter which locker room you really use? And ultimately, I think we'll start seeing just total unisex locker rooms. So let's read the story. Let's see what they have to say. And again, not making a moral argument. You guys can make the moral arguments, not me. School punishes male teacher for refusing to watch a naked girl in the boys' locker room. A Florida school district allowed a self-described transgender female student access to the boys' locker room with no warning to parents. The first time she walked in, she caught boys literally with their pants down. A Florida school district allowed a self-described transgender female student regular access to the boys' locker room with no advanced warning. Right, we just read that. Thanks for reiterating. And this is from a complaint letter. They said that they had been observed changing by an obvious girl. With a gag order, school administrators forbade teachers from talking about the change and ordered a male PE teacher to supervise the potentially undressed girl in the Chasco Middle School locker room, the letter says. When he refused to knowingly place himself in a position to observe a minor female in the nude or otherwise in a state of undress, administrators told him he will be transferred to another school as discipline for not doing your job in the locker room. And I think, so again, I do think it's a bit hyperbolic, but I think this frames it in a more legalese, like fair kind of way, that he would put himself in a position to maybe see her. And that's a different argument, right? Let's not even get into that anymore.
Right, this is the point where I really started to take notice in the fact that he's changing the subject quickly. A little laugh and a but I think he's just trying not to paint himself into a corner to make himself out to be a fool, because Tim, what you're saying is foolish, as far as I'm concerned. People do not want to do these things. People do not want to put themselves in a place where they're uncomfortable. And basically what the title said is pretty much explained what has been going on. He's being punished for refusing to do the job. That's exactly what it is. It's not hyperbolic at all. But you're again trying to frame things in a way that makes it all seem like this is just the inevitable, and it's not, because as I said, we've got millennia of, well, being men and women and having different sensibilities, and gender is not fucking fluid, right? The gender can be male, it can be female, right? I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. And if you don't like that, Tim, well, that's just a shame, well, I'm telling you. You're trying to frame things as this is going to be normal over the next 20, 30 years, this is all going to be thing. But see what they did. They did not tell anybody. Right, put gag on it. Why aren't you talking about that, Tim? If you're really, really, really just analysing this for the sake of analysing it, because if I was reading this article, I would be ripping this to shreds right now, trying to find the bare essence of it. Exactly what the score is. And I would also be digging in through the fact that they were put a gag order on people. Why aren't you talking about that, Tim? Why are you still trying to say that this is all nothing, it's been blown out of proportion, this is how it's going to be normally? It's not. Because 90% of the world doesn't agree with you. And even if 90% is in the generous side, let's say 70% of the world, that's still fucking the majority. So come on, Tim. I really hope you see this video and then respond back to me, because I honestly want to know why you do not address these things, Tim. Right, but anyway, as you can see, the way he's framing this is, well, I don't agree with it in the fact that he's not talking about the gag order, then he laughs off the rest of it, and he's now going to change the subject, so let's continue.
The point is, this is an older gentleman, presumably. I don't mean older, like 50s. I mean, like, this is someone who's an adult who has certain sensibilities and says, this is not socially acceptable and I won't do it. However, based on new social changes and rules and laws, actually, he is now a bigot for having, you know, believing in certain things. And while I did say it has an analog kind of to civil rights, I will say that there is a difference between someone based on race, like, you know, two children who are Latino, Asian, black, and white, they're still male or female. And thus, you can still differentiate between, you know, the genders or the sexes. This is a different scenario. But again, I think in 30 years, we're going to look back on this and be like, what's the big deal? A society will. And so for all of you who are staunch traditionalists and conservatives, well, you go ahead and make your moral arguments, but I really do think this is not a fight you're going to win.
Well, that's because it's not a fight you want them to win, isn't that right, Tim? I mean, the more and more you speak on this one, the more and more SJW you become. This is going to keep continuing and continuing through this video. I have seen this already. This is the video that inspired me to actually finally say something. Because your colours are showing, Tim. And not only are they showing, buddy, they are really bright. Let's continue.
In an email, an administrator initially threatened to pull the male coach, to put the male coach on administrative leave, telling him that refusing to supervise a potentially naked female student would not be tolerated, said Liberty Counsel attorney Richard Mast. The school's other PE teacher, who is female, also objected and was ignored. So this is not just a man. This is both male and female objecting to these rules.
Okay, Tim. You actually almost can pull that one off convincingly there. But even my autistic mind managed to catch the gentle note of surprise in your voice when you found out there that a female teacher objected to it as well. Well, maybe it was just me who caught that, but I don't know. But anyway, Tim, well done. Moving on.
Pasco parents have yet to be informed by the school of the situation, yet transgender student continues to have open access to private mail areas, according to Liberty Counsel. Despite the initial September incident, then legal contact in October, the elected board for the district with 70,500 students has so far taken no action, and administrators have refused to budge. Unfortunately, these things are going on across the country, primarily with school psychologists and guidance counselors, said Mast. He noted that it's standard for public schools to pass transgender policies without informing parents, voters, or taxpayers first. That means the public only hears about it after children have been affected, withholding all opportunities for parents to prevent their child's exposure to this kind of sexual indoctrination, confusion, and exploitation. Last year in a Georgia public school, a 5-year-old girl was allegedly assaulted by a gender-fluid male classmate in the school bathroom after a transgender policy allowed him access. He allegedly pushed her against the wall and repeatedly jammed his fingers inside her while she struggled. The district refuses to believe the alleged victim, and the mother has pulled her daughter from the school, which never notified her of the incident and maintains its bathroom policy. They say sex uber ales and definitely don't tell parents. I think I pronounced that right. It appears Pasco schools adopted their transgender policies with no notice to their elected school board, parents, or voters.
Oh my God, Tim, just blow your fucking nose. 3 times you touched your nose in the space of fucking 15 seconds. What the fuck? Oh, anyway, Jesus. Just had to say that.
Instead, they were implemented after the district hired Jackie Jackson Dean, a school psychologist, as a LGBT liaison. Her website lists her as the primary author of the school's district LGBT Best Practices Guide, which names her as its lead content developer. That guide says transgender pronouns, locker room, bathroom dress code, and sports access are a student's right. About overnight school trips, it says, schools should work with students and their family to devise a plan for the trip based on the student's comfort level. Remember, schools have an obligation to not disclose the student's transgender status to other students or parents unless the student has provided explicit permission to do so. So a child could be placed overnight in a room with an emotionally or mentally struggling child of the opposite sex without that child or her parents knowing. The guide gives school staff a script of talking points about gender-inclusive schools. Here are some selections for responses to concerned parents and students. Okay, so I want to stop here and make a few points. For one, I'll say it for the 3rd time. These changes are going to happen, and I really don't think there's anything anyone can do about it because it's not an issue that happens like that. These schools didn't just arbitrarily decide to enact these things. These things happen at in legislation.
I call bullshit, Tim. Problem being with your whole it's gonna happen anyway in this legislation bollocks. That school enacted that quickly and quietly, all on the behest of an LGBT activist. Right now, you're quite for rights of everyone, Tim, but then again you're forgetting about the freedom of association that you have in your constitution. And people are free to associate with who they want, right? That also means that people don't have to associate with people who they don't want to. And if things like transgenderism, because it is a trend, it is a joke, and it is going to be laughed at with humiliation for all those idiots who want to pretend they're a pan-dimensional liquid beast from the Megalodon cluster or some bullshit like that. I don't care. Right? Nobody really cares, but when you're forcing it down people's throats. But this is the thing, Tim. You are happy that this is going to happen. You can see it with the glee that is the gleam in your eye. Am I the only one that sees this? And I'm starting to see you for what you are. You're an SJW in a liberal's clothing. You are the proverbial wolf in sheep's clothing, mate. And I think I've had just about enough. Well, anyway, my ladies and gentlemen, this was a longer video than I thought it was going to be a long one, but you know me, I don't try to take things out of context, and if you think I'm wrong in my assessment of Tim, the link to his video is in the description. Please, go watch the whole thing. I've watched it fully through, and I say once I stopped arguing about the points, I started listening to what he was saying and how he was saying it. Watch his thing again without my interaction. Go onto his channel, watch his video, and let me know if you agree with me or you disagree with me. Let me know in the comments. If you want to get a hold of me, you can get me on Twitter at @XanderReturns, XANDER returns. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next one.